I am Anna, 32, living in Boston with my husband James and our beautiful 2-year-old daughter Lily. My relationship with my mother Sandra has always been complicated, to say the least. Lately, my phone has been constantly ringing with her calls, all with the same message: it is unfair that she cannot see her granddaughter. What she conveniently forgets is the years of favoritism she showed my stepsister Melissa over me. Before I tell you how my mother's favoritism shaped my entire childhood, let me know where you're watching from and hit that subscribe button if you've ever had to set boundaries with family who hurt you. My early childhood was relatively normal and happy. Until I was 8, I lived with both my biological parents in a small house in Connecticut. I remember weekend picnics at the local park bedtime stories, with both parents taking turns to read and feeling completely secure in their love. My mother Sandra was attentive and caring back then, always ready with a hug when I fell or praise when I accomplished something new. Everything changed when I was 8, and my father announced he was leaving. The arguments had been going on for months, but I was too young to understand what was happening. One day, he simply packed his bags and walked out the door. His goodbye was quick, with a promise to see me soon that would be broken more times than kept over the coming years. After the divorce, my mother and I moved to a smaller apartment. She worked longer hours, and I saw less of her. There were nights when I would find her crying in the kitchen after she thought I had gone to bed. I learnt to be quiet, to take care of myself, to not add to her burdens. Phone calls from my father became increasingly rare and visits even rarer. When I was 9, everything changed again. My mother met Richard at her workplace. He was kind, successful, and showed interest in both of us. Within 8 months, they were married, and we moved into his larger home in a nicer neighborhood. I was hopeful that our life would improve, that my mother would be happy again. With Richard came his daughter Melissa, who was exactly my age. I was actually excited to have a sister after being an only child for so long. I imagined late-night talks, shared secrets, and a built-in best friend. The reality was quite different. From the beginning, there was something off about how my mother treated Melissa compared to me. It was subtle at first, small things that I tried to ignore. Melissa would get the first choice of dessert. Melissa would get asked about her day at school before I did. Melissa would get slightly longer hugs. Richard was kind to me, but somewhat distant. He never treated me badly, but I could feel the difference in how he looked at Melissa versus me. She was his actual daughter, and I was the extra child that came with his new wife. The first clear memory I have of feeling like an outsider in my new family was during my 10th birthday. My mother arranged a small party at our house with just a few friends from school. The cake was store-bought, the decorations minimal. I received some nice gifts, including a set of art supplies I had wanted, but nothing extravagant. 2 months later, Melissa celebrated her 10th birthday with an elaborate party at an indoor water park. Richard rented the entire venue for the afternoon, invited Melissa's entire class, and hired a professional photographer to document the day. My mother spent weeks planning every detail, from custom invitations to personalized party favors. The difference was impossible to ignore. When I asked my mother why Melissa's birthday was so much bigger than mine, she brushed it off with excuses. Richard wanted to do something special for his daughter, and we were still settling in during your birthday. I nodded and pretended to understand, but inside I was deeply confused. What had I done wrong? Why was I less deserving of celebration? In the months that followed, I tried everything I could think of to earn my mother's attention and approval. I kept my room spotless. I brought home perfect report cards. I offered to help with chores without being asked. Sometimes my efforts were acknowledged with a quick, "Good job," but more often they went unnoticed, while Melissa received praise for doing much less. I remember sitting at the dinner table one evening while my mother gushed over Melissa getting a B on a math test after previously failing. That same day, I had won the spelling bee at school, but when I tried to share my news, my mother gave a distracted, "That is nice, honey," before turning back to Melissa. Richard gave me a sympathetic smile, but said nothing to redirect my mother's attention. By the end of that first year as a blended family, I had begun to accept that this was my new normal. My mother had a clear favorite, and it was not me. I still loved her desperately and kept trying to win her approval, but a small part of me was beginning to build walls around my heart for protection. As I entered middle school, the pattern of favoritism became more entrenched and painful. I threw myself into academics and extracurricular activities, partly because I enjoyed them, but mostly because I thought achievements might finally make my mother notice me. I joined the debate team, the school newspaper, and the math club. My grades were consistently at the top of my class. Meanwhile, Melissa struggled academically. She was more interested in social activities and sports than schoolwork. Instead of encouraging her to work harder or face consequences for poor grades, my mother became her constant advocate and support system. Melissa learns differently, she would explain to teachers. She needs more support and understanding. The same consideration was never extended to me when I faced challenges. If I struggled with anything, the expectation was that I would figure it out myself. After all, I was the smart one. When I was 12, I spent weeks working on a science fair project about water purification methods. I stayed up late researching building my display and practicing my presentation. The night before the fair, my mother promised she would be there. I would not miss it, she assured me. The next day, as I stood nervously by my project, waiting for the judges, I kept scanning the crowd for my mother. The judges came and went. I won first place. Still no sign of her. When I returned home, clutching my blue ribbon, I found a note on the kitchen counter. Had to take Melissa to her softball game. Emergency replacement for another parent. Dinner in the fridge. Mum. I heated up the leftover casserole and ate alone my blue ribbon lying forgotten on the table. When they finally came home, Melissa was bubbling with excitement about scoring the winning run. My mother was just as excited, praising her athletic ability. It took 20 minutes before either of them noticed my ribbon. "Oh, you won," my mother said, glancing at it briefly. "That is great, honey. I knew you would." No apology for missing it. No questions about my project or presentation. Just a quick acknowledgement before returning to Melissa's softball triumph. As we entered high school, the disparities became even more pronounced. When Melissa turned 16, Richard immediately signed her up for driving lessons and surprised her with a brand new compact car on her birthday. My mother contributed to the insurance payments. When my 16th birthday came 3 weeks later, driving lessons or a car were not even mentioned as possibilities. I brought it up cautiously, only to be told, "You know we cannot afford 2 cars for teenagers. You can use the bus or save up from your part-time job for driving school if it is important to you." I did exactly that. I got a job at the local library shelving books after school and on weekends. It took 6 months to save enough for driving lessons. While Melissa was driving herself to the mall and friends' houses, I was taking the bus to work to earn money for a privilege she had been given without question. Whenever I expressed frustration about these disparities to my mother, she always had ready excuses. Melissa needs more support to build her confidence. Richard wanted to do this for his daughter. "You are so self-sufficient, you do not need as much help. You will be fine no matter what, but Melissa struggles." The message was clear. My competence was being used against me, while Melissa's struggles were rewarded with extra attention and resources. Christmas in our house highlighted the inequities in painful clarity. One year, when we were 17, I received clothes, a few books, and a modest gift card. Melissa received an expensive laptop for school, designer clothes, and a weekend trip to New York City with my mother for girls' time. The disparities were impossible to ignore, though I tried my best to smile and express gratitude for what I did receive. My high school graduation should have been a moment of triumph and celebration. I was valedictorian, giving a speech I had worked on for weeks. My mother attended the ceremony and seemed genuinely proud as I delivered my address. But halfway through the reception afterward, she checked her watch repeatedly and then apologetically explained she needed to leave. "Melissa has her final dance recital today. I promised I would help her get ready. You understand, right? This is important to her." I nodded and said I understood, but I did not. Why was Melissa's dance recital more important than my graduation reception? Why was I always the one expected to understand, to compromise, to put my feelings aside? My father had not even bothered to attend, sending only a card with a modest check inside. That day solidified something in me. I realized that no achievement, no milestone, no need of mine would ever take precedence in my mother's eyes. The emotional distance between us had grown into a chasm that I no longer knew how to bridge, nor was I sure I wanted to try anymore. As senior year progressed, I focused entirely on my future. I applied for every scholarship I could find, determined to fund my own education and build independence. I was accepted to several universities, ultimately choosing Boston University with a nearly full academic scholarship. It was far enough from home to necessitate living on campus, which was exactly what I wanted. When I told my mother my decision, her response was telling. "Boston, that is so far away. What if you need something? What if something goes wrong?" The concern would have been touching if she had not followed it immediately with, "Melissa is staying local for community college. She is not ready to go away yet. The unspoken comparison was clear. Melissa's needs and choices were the right ones. Mine were suspect, potentially problematic. But for once, I did not care what she thought. Boston represented freedom from the constant feeling of being second best in my own family. I was ready to start fresh. College was a revelation. For the first time, I was judged solely on my own merits, not in constant comparison to Melissa. My roommate Jasmine became the first real friend I had allowed myself to have in years. I had become so accustomed to people preferring Melissa that I had stopped trying to form close relationships. I called home dutifully every Sunday evening for the first semester. The conversations followed a predictable pattern. After brief questions about my classes, my mother would launch into detailed updates about Melissa, her social life, her struggles with college coursework, her new boyfriend. I would listen politely, offer appropriate responses, and end the call feeling drained and invisible. By second semester, I started finding reasons to miss these calls. I joined study groups that met Sunday evenings. I volunteered for weekend campus events. I picked up extra shifts at the campus bookstore where I worked part-time. The space helped me breathe, helped me discover who I was outside of my family dynamic. In sophomore year, I met James in an economics class. He was thoughtful-driven and genuinely interested in hearing my thoughts and feelings. The first time he asked about my family and then actually listened without judgment or distraction, I nearly cried. It took months before I could share the full truth about my relationship with my mother and Melissa, the years of feeling secondary and unimportant. That must have been incredibly painful, he said when I finally told him. No dismissal, no suggesting I was overreacting or being too sensitive, just acknowledgement of my experience. My mother's communication became increasingly irregular. Weeks would go by without contact, then she would call suddenly, usually when something was happening with Melissa. Our conversations became less about maintaining a relationship and more about her keeping me superficially updated on family matters, with Melissa always at the center. During junior year, I experienced a health crisis when my appendix nearly ruptured. I was rushed into emergency surgery and spent 3 days in the hospital. Jasmine called my mother, who drove up to Boston the next day. She stayed for exactly one afternoon, sitting awkwardly by my hospital bed, making small talk and checking her phone constantly. As evening approached, she stood up and collected her purse. I need to head back tonight. Melissa is having some serious boyfriend drama and needs me. You understand, right? You have your friends here and the doctors say you are going to be fine. I nodded mechanically, too tired and in too much pain to argue. James arrived shortly after she left, his arms full of my favorite snacks and books to keep me occupied during recovery. He stayed until the nurses kicked him out, then returned first thing in the morning. The contrast between his care and my mother's brief distracted visit was stark and revealing. That was the moment I fully accepted that my mother's behavior would never change. The realization was both painful and freeing. I stopped expecting what she could not give and focused instead on the relationships that nurtured me. When I graduated from college with honors in economics and psychology, my mother attended the ceremony. She sat between Richard and Melissa, who had apparently decided to join at the last minute for support. Throughout the ceremony, I could see my mother constantly turning to speak to Melissa, missing the moment when my name was called. In the photos James's parents took afterward, she looks distracted already, mentally elsewhere. With my degrees in hand, I secured a job at a financial consulting firm in Boston. James and I moved into a small apartment together, merging our lives officially after 3 years of dating. We established our routines, our favorite restaurants, our circle of friends. I spoke to my mother once a month, brief surface-level conversations that maintained the connection without requiring emotional vulnerability. When James proposed a year later on a weekend trip to Cape Cod, I was ecstatic. He had become my rock, my chosen family. I called my mother to share the news, hoping that this milestone might elicit genuine happiness for me. Engaged. That is nice, honey. A bit soon, don't you think? You are only 24. After this lukewarm response, she immediately pivoted. Melissa just got offered an assistant manager position at her company. She's really moving up quickly. I ended the call shortly after fighting back tears. James held me while I cried, not for the first time, over my mother's inability to simply be happy for me without bringing Melissa into it. Planning our wedding became yet another exercise in managing my mother's divided loyalties. When we decided on a small intimate ceremony with just 30 guests, she pushed for something larger, so the whole family can attend. When I explained our budget constraints and our desire for a meaningful rather than extravagant day, she offered to contribute financially with a condition: If I am helping pay, Melissa should be a bridesmaid. She would be so hurt to be left out. I had not intended to ask Melissa to be in the wedding party. We had no relationship outside of family gatherings. But to keep peace, I agreed immediately, regretting the decision when my mother began calling with Melissa's concerns about the bridesmaid dress colour, the hairstyle I had suggested, and the date of the bachelorette party. Our wedding day was beautiful despite these tensions. James's family embraced me warmly, his mother helping with details my own mother showed little interest in. During the reception, my mother spent most of her time talking with extended family about Melissa's accomplishments, rather than celebrating our day. As we prepared to leave for our honeymoon, my mother pulled me aside. The ceremony was nice, but I wish you had let me be more involved. I barely got to do anything as the mother of the bride. I did not point out that her involvement had been limited by her own choice, by her constant distractions and divided attention. I simply hugged her, thanked her for coming, and left with my new husband for a week of blissful distance from family complications. 3 years into our marriage, James and I decided we were ready to start a family. We were financially stable, had moved to a larger apartment with a second bedroom, and felt emotionally prepared for the challenges of parenthood. I became pregnant quickly, much to our joy and slight surprise. The pregnancy proved difficult from the beginning. Severe morning sickness left me dehydrated and weak for the first trimester. My doctor placed me on partial bed rest when high blood pressure developed in the second trimester. James was incredibly supportive, taking on extra household responsibilities and advocating for me during doctor appointments. I called my mother to share the pregnancy news when we passed the first trimester. Her response was positive but brief. "That is wonderful, sweetie. Being a grandmother will be so interesting." She quickly shifted the conversation to Melissa's engagement and upcoming wedding plans. As my pregnancy progressed with complications, I had hoped my mother might offer more support. Instead, she was completely absorbed in helping Melissa plan an elaborate wedding. Our phone conversations consisted almost entirely of updates about venue selections, flower arrangements, and dress fittings. When I mentioned my health concerns during these calls, her responses were cursory: "Make sure to rest," or "Listen to your doctor." No offers to visit, to help to simply be present during a challenging time. James's mother, by contrast, called regularly with genuine concern, sent care packages with pregnancy teas and comfortable pajamas, and came to stay for a week when I was struggling most with the bed rest restrictions. Lily was born after a difficult 36-hour labour that ended in an emergency C-section. James called my mother immediately afterward, and she promised to drive up the following day. 3 days passed before she finally arrived, explaining that she had needed to help Melissa address wedding invitations before she could make the trip. She stayed for exactly 2 nights in our guest room, spending more time texting with Melissa about wedding details than engaging with me or showing interest in her newborn granddaughter. I was still recovering from major surgery while adjusting to breastfeeding and severe sleep deprivation. Her presence added stress rather than relief. The most telling moment came when she insisted on taking photos of the baby. She took dozens of Lily alone, which seemed normal enough. Then she asked to hold Lily for some pictures, which James took. Then most painfully, when Melissa called to check in, my mother video chatted to show her the baby and asked me to hand Lily to her so she could take screenshots of Aunt Melissa seeing the baby for the first time. She took more photos documenting Melissa's virtual interaction with Lily than she had of me, the actual mother, with my daughter. The first few months of motherhood were among the most challenging of my life. Lily had colic and cried for hours each evening. I developed postpartum depression, struggling with overwhelming anxiety and intrusive thoughts about harm coming to the baby. James encouraged me to seek help, and I began therapy and medication that slowly began to help. During this difficult period, my mother called occasionally, but offered little practical or emotional support. When she did visit about 2 months after Lily's birth, her comments were often unhelpful or outright hurtful. "Melissa is so natural with children," she remarked after watching me struggle to soothe a crying Lily. "She babysits for her co-workers' kids and they never cry like this with her." Or, "You seem so tense around the baby. Motherhood should come more naturally. Maybe you are overthinking everything." These comments cut deeply during a time when I was already questioning my abilities as a mother. James, who had initially tried to maintain a respectful relationship with my mother, became increasingly protective of me. After overhearing one particularly hurtful comparison to Melissa, he gently but firmly suggested to my mother that if she could not offer constructive support, perhaps shorter visits would be better for everyone. She left in a huff, calling me later to complain that James was controlling and keeping her from bonding with her granddaughter. The irony of her sudden interest in bonding was not lost on me. As I recovered from postpartum depression and grew more confident in my mothering, I also became more protective of the family environment I wanted for Lily. I had grown up feeling perpetually inadequate, constantly comparing myself to someone else and finding myself wanting. I was determined that my daughter would never experience that same sense of conditional love or acceptance. When Lily's first birthday approached, we planned a small celebration at our apartment with a few friends who had children around the same age. I invited my mother, specifying that it would be a low-key afternoon with cake and presents, nothing elaborate. The day of the party, my mother arrived an hour early, which initially seemed thoughtful until I opened the door to find Melissa standing beside her. "Surprise!" my mother exclaimed. "Melissa wanted to be here for Lily's special day. Isn't that wonderful?" I was too shocked to respond effectively. James stepped in, welcoming them, but clearly confused by the unexpected guest. Throughout the afternoon, my mother and Melissa dominated the small gathering. Melissa appointed herself unofficial photographer, directing group poses and interrupting conversations to capture special moments. My mother constantly referred to them as Grandma and Auntie, centering their relationship with Lily rather than celebrating our daughter on her day. The final straw came during the gift opening. My mother had brought an extravagant dollhouse that was clearly inappropriate for a 1-year-old, with tiny pieces that were obvious choking hazards. When James gently pointed this out and suggested we might put it away until Lily was older, my mother became defensive. "Well, Melissa picked it out. She knows what children like. I think you are being overprotective." James, usually diplomatic, finally reached his limit. "Sandra," he said firmly, "Anna and I are Lily's parents. We make the decisions about what's appropriate for her. If you and Melissa want to be involved in her life, you need to respect our boundaries." My mother gasped as if slapped. "How dare you speak to me that way, after everything I have done for Anna, for both of you?" The other guests became visibly uncomfortable. James suggested he and my mother step into the kitchen to continue the conversation privately. I could hear raised voices, my mother's accusations, and James's measured but firm responses. Melissa sat awkwardly on the couch, texting frantically, presumably updating her father on the drama. 10 minutes later, my mother stormed out of the kitchen, grabbed her purse, and announced they were leaving. "I will not stay where I am not respected," she declared loudly. "Come on, Melissa." As they left, my mother turned back with a parting shot. "Call me when you come to your senses, Anna. Family should be more important than your husband's control issues." The door slammed behind them, leaving an awkward silence in their wake. Our friends, bless them, rallied immediately, helping to redirect the party and salvage the celebration for Lily, who remained blissfully unaware of the adult tension. That night, after all our guests had gone, and Lily was asleep, James and I sat on the couch in exhausted silence. "I am sorry," he finally said. "I tried to be respectful, but the way she talks to you, the way she dismisses your feelings and your role as Lily's mother, I couldn't stay silent anymore." I leaned against his shoulder, unexpectedly relieved. "Thank you for standing up for us," I said. "No one ever did that for me growing up." We did not know it then, but that birthday party confrontation would mark the beginning of a much bigger change in my relationship with my mother, one that would finally force us to address the lifetime of favoritism that had shaped me. For 6 months after Lily's birthday party, communication with my mother was limited and tense. She called occasionally, the conversations brief and superficial. I could sense her anger simmering beneath the surface, but she avoided direct reference to the confrontation with James. Instead, she made passive-aggressive comments about certain people coming between family members, clearly implying that James was the problem rather than her own behaviour. I maintained these minimal conversations, not yet ready to completely sever ties, but also unwilling to pretend nothing was wrong. James supported whatever level of contact I felt comfortable with, never pressuring me in either direction. Then came the day that broke something in me that I didn't know could still break. I was scrolling through social media when I saw photos my mother had posted. They showed her Richard and Melissa at Disney World, with Melissa's 5-year-old stepdaughter from her new marriage. My mother's caption read, "Maternal. Nothing better than taking my granddaughter to the most magical place on earth, making memories that will last a lifetime." My hands shook as I stared at the images. Disney World. The trip my mother had promised to take me on when I was 9 years old. The trip that was always coming soon, but never materialized. The trip that became a running joke in our household, with my mother saying things like, "Maybe next year," until I stopped asking, stopped hoping. And now she had taken Melissa's stepdaughter, a child she had known for less than a year, who was not even biologically related to her, on this long-promised trip. She was calling this child her granddaughter, while making no mention of Lily. I sat on our bedroom floor and broke down completely. It wasn't just about the trip itself. It was about the pattern repeated throughout my life, made even more painful because now it was extending to the next generation. My daughter was being treated as secondary, just as I had been. James found me still crying 20 minutes later. He sat beside me, held me and listened as I poured out decades of hurt, rejection and confusion. Why was I never enough? I asked through tears. What did I do wrong? And now she's doing it to Lily too. That evening, after putting Lily to bed, James and I had a long, honest conversation about boundaries. He shared his observations about how interactions with my mother affected me, the tension before her visits, the sadness afterward, the way I second-guessed myself more frequently after our conversations. You deserve better, he said simply, and so does Lily. For the first time, I truly believed him. The next morning, I called my mother, determined to express my feelings calmly and honestly. Mom, I need to talk to you about something important, I began when she answered. Can it wait? I'm helping Melissa organize her kitchen remodel right now, she replied. The familiar dismissal nearly made me hang up, but I persisted. No, Mom, it can't wait. This is about our relationship and some patterns that have been hurting me for a very long time. There was a pause, then a sigh. Fine. What is it? I took a deep breath and spoke from my heart. I explained how seeing the Disney World photos had affected me, reminding me of promises never kept. I described the pattern of favoritism I had experienced throughout my childhood and adolescence, providing specific examples to illustrate that this wasn't a vague feeling, but a documented pattern of behavior. I explained how that pattern now seemed to be extending to the next generation, with Lily being treated as less important than Melissa's stepdaughter. Throughout my carefully prepared speech, my mother was silent. When I finished, I waited anxiously for her response, hoping for acknowledgement, understanding, perhaps even an apology. Instead, she laughed dismissively. Oh, Anna, you've always been so sensitive, so jealous of Melissa. I treated you both exactly the same. If anything, I was harder on Melissa because you were so self-sufficient. Her gaslighting took my breath away. Mom, that's not true. I just gave you specific examples. You're remembering things wrong, she interrupted. That's not how it happened at all. And this Disney trip, Melissa needed help with her stepdaughter. The poor child's mother is completely uninvolved. She needed a grandmother figure. I was helping out, not playing favorites. What about Lily? I asked, my voice trembling with emotion. She's your actual granddaughter, and you've seen her 3 times in her entire life. That's your fault, my mother snapped. You and James live so far away. You've made it clear you don't want me involved. You've always been difficult, Anna. Not like Melissa. She appreciates what I do for her. The familiar comparison was the final straw. Something snapped inside me, and 20 years of suppressed hurt and anger came pouring out. Difficult. I was a straight-A student who never got in trouble, who took care of herself because you were too busy taking care of Melissa. I worked through college, built a career, married a wonderful man, and created a stable home for your granddaughter, all with almost no support from you, and you call that difficult. I continued listing every birthday, graduation, and achievement she had minimized or missed for Melissa's benefit. Every Christmas, where the gift disparity was impossible to ignore. Every time I had needed her and she had chosen Melissa instead. And now, I concluded, you're starting the same pattern with Lily, and I won't allow it. She deserves better than to grow up feeling second best. There was a long silence on the other end of the line, then a cold, I think you need professional help, Anna. This level of jealousy and resentment isn't normal. Call me when you are thinking more rationally. The line went dead. She had hung up on me. I sat in stunned silence, the phone still pressed to my ear. I had finally said everything I had held back for decades, and she had dismissed it entirely. The hurt was profound, but underneath it was something unexpected relief. I had spoken my truth regardless of whether she could hear it. Within an hour, my phone began buzzing with text messages from my mother. Rather than reflecting on what I had said, she doubled down, telling me I had always been difficult, that I was too sensitive, that I was imagining slights where none existed. She accused me of trying to keep her from her granddaughter out of spite, and suggested that James was turning me against my family. The final message read, When you're ready to apologize for your accusations, we can talk. Until then, I think we need some space. I showed the messages to James, who read them with growing concern. "She's turning this around completely," he observed. "Making herself the victim when you're the one who's been hurt." "She's always done that," I said quietly. I just never challenged her directly before. We agreed that some distance from my mother was probably healthy at this point. I didn't respond to her messages, deciding to give both of us space to process. 3 weeks later, the doorbell rang on a Saturday afternoon. James opened it to find my mother standing there unannounced and uninvited. "I've come to see my granddaughter," she announced, attempting to step past him into our apartment. James blocked the doorway politely but firmly. "Sandra, this isn't a good time. Anna has made it clear she needs some space right now." "I don't need your permission to see my daughter and granddaughter," she retorted, her voice rising. Anna, come tell your husband to let me in." I appeared behind James' Lily on my hip. Seeing my mother's angry face, Lily buried her head against my shoulder. "Mum, you need to leave," I said quietly. "I told you how I felt, and you dismissed everything I said. You accused me of lying about my own experiences. We can't have a healthy relationship until you're willing to acknowledge how your choices have affected me." "This is ridiculous," she exclaimed loudly. "I have rights as a grandmother." "Actually, you don't," James said calmly. "Not legally and not morally if you can't respect Anna as Lily's mother." As neighbours began peering out into the hallway at the commotion, my mother's face reddened with embarrassment and anger. "Fine, if that's how you want it. But don't come crying to me when you realise what you've thrown away. Family is everything, Anna, and you're choosing to destroy yours." As she stormed away, I closed the door, hands shaking. James wrapped his arms around Lily and me. "You did the right thing," he whispered. "We're your family too, and we're not going anywhere." In that moment, I made the difficult but necessary decision to cut contact with my mother until she could acknowledge the harm she had caused and show genuine willingness to change. It wasn't a decision made in anger, but in the clear-eyed recognition that continuing the relationship in its current form would only perpetuate patterns of hurt that had shaped too much of my life already. The 6 months that followed my decision to cut contact with my mother were both challenging and healing. There was grief, of course, mourning the mother I had needed, but never truly had. There was guilt, carefully nurtured by years of being told that family obligation trumped personal well-being. And there was uncertainty about whether I had done the right thing. To process these complex emotions, I began seeing a therapist specializing in family trauma, Dr. Marshall helped me understand that what I had experienced was a form of childhood emotional neglect, with clear favoritism that had impacted my sense of self-worth. Children who grow up with a parent clearly favoring a sibling often struggle with feeling fundamentally flawed, she explained during one session. You internalize the message that you are less deserving of love and attention, which isn't true and never was. These sessions helped me recognize patterns I had carried into adulthood. Perfectionism, difficulty, accepting help, constant self-criticism, and a deep-seated fear of abandonment. I began to see how these patterns affected my relationships, my parenting, even my career choices. James attended several sessions with me, seeking to understand how best to support my healing process. His unwavering support gave me strength on days when I questioned my decision to establish boundaries with my mother. About 3 months into our estrangement, my stepfather Richard called. It was unexpected. He had always stayed on the periphery of conflicts between my mother and me. "Anna," he began awkwardly, "I wanted to check in. Your mother is very upset about the situation." I braced myself for pressure to reconcile, but what followed surprised me. "I'm not calling to make peace exactly," he continued, "but I want you to know I understand why you're hurt. I saw what happened over the years. I should have said something back then." His acknowledgement, however late, brought tears to my eyes. "Why didn't you?" I asked. He sighed heavily. "It's complicated. I didn't want to cause problems in my marriage. Sandra is sensitive about her parenting. And honestly, I favoured my own daughter too. It wasn't right, but it happened." While his honesty didn't undo the past, it validated my experience in a way my mother never had. We ended the call with no promises or plans, but a slightly better understanding between us. 2 weeks later, Melissa reached out via text. Her message was a confusing mix of support and defence of my mother. "I know Mom can be difficult," she wrote, "and maybe she did favour me sometimes, but she loves you, Anna. She's heartbroken that she can't see Lily. Can't you forgive her and move forward?" I responded carefully, explaining that forgiveness wasn't the issue. It was about recognising harmful patterns and ensuring they didn't continue. "This isn't about punishing Mom," I wrote. It's about protecting myself and Lily from continuing a cycle that hurt me deeply. Melissa didn't reply, but I later heard from Richard that she had been upset by my response. It appeared she had expected me to immediately agree to reconciliation based on her intervention. As the months passed, pressure began building from extended family members. My mother had apparently been telling everyone who would listen that I was keeping her granddaughter from her out of spite. Aunts, cousins, and family friends called or messaged urging me to reconsider. "She's your mother, Anna. Whatever happened, you only get one. Family should always come first. You'll regret this when she's gone. Everyone makes mistakes in parenting. You need to forgive." These messages intensified my guilt, but my therapy sessions helped me recognize that they reflected societal pressure rather than what was actually healthy for me and my family. Dr. Marshall helped me craft responses that were firm but not defensive, explaining my boundaries without justifying them to people who hadn't lived my experience. The first Thanksgiving without contact was both painful and peaceful. Instead of the tense, performative family gathering that had become our norm, James and I hosted a Friendsgiving with people who truly supported and valued us. Lily toddled happily among people who delighted in her without comparison or condition. Christmas brought more pressure with my mother sending extravagant gifts for Lily and a card that read, "Please don't punish me for whatever you think I did wrong. A grandmother deserves to be part of her granddaughter's life." The phrasing, "whatever you think I did wrong," confirmed that she still wasn't acknowledging the legitimacy of my feelings or experiences. I returned the gifts with a brief note, explaining that presents couldn't substitute for respect and understanding. In January, nearly 6 months into our estrangement, I received a lengthy email from my mother. The subject line read, "This has gone on long enough." The content was a masterclass in missing the point. She wrote at length about her rights as a grandmother, how unfair it was that she couldn't see Lily, and how I was destroying our family with my unreasonable grudges. The most revealing line came near the end. "It's completely unfair that I can't see my granddaughter when I've been nothing but a good mother to you." I read the email several times, initially with anger, then with sadness, and finally with clarity. My mother still didn't understand or refused to acknowledge the fundamental issue. She saw access to Lily as a right she deserved, rather than a relationship that needed to be built on mutual respect and healthy boundaries. After discussing it with James and Dr. Marshall, I crafted a response that was firm but not cruel. "Mom seeing Lily isn't a right. You're entitled to regardless of our history. It's a relationship that depends on having a healthy relationship with both of her parents first. I've explained the patterns of behavior that hurt me growing up and continue to hurt me now. If you want to be part of Lily's life, you need to acknowledge those patterns, offer a genuine apology, and commit to treating both of us with fairness and respect going forward. When you're ready for that conversation, I'm open to it. Until then, I need to protect both myself and my daughter from experiencing more of the same hurt." Her reply came within hours, full of indignation and blame. She accused me of making impossible demands and setting unreasonable conditions for a relationship that should be unconditional. She insisted that she had always treated me fairly and that any perceived favoritism was simply my jealousy and insecurity. The email ended with, "When you decide to stop punishing me and want a real relationship again, you know where to find me. Until then, I can only pray that you come to your senses before it's too late." I didn't respond. Instead, I wrote a letter I never intended to send, expressing all my hurt, anger, and grief. Dr. Marshall suggested I read it aloud in an empty chair exercise, imagining my mother sitting across from me, truly hearing me for the first time. The emotional release was powerful, leaving me with a sense of having said what needed saying, whether or not my actual mother ever heard or acknowledged it. That evening, I sat with James on our balcony after Lily was asleep. "I think I need to accept that she may never understand," I said quietly. "She may never be the mother I needed or the grandmother Lily deserves." James took my hand. "That's her loss, not yours, and definitely not Lily's." I squeezed his hand, grateful for his unwavering support through this difficult journey. I'm still open to reconciliation if she ever truly acknowledges what happened, but I'm not going to keep hoping for it or letting that hope hurt me anymore. I sent one final message to my mother. "When you're ready to acknowledge how your choices hurt me, we can talk. Until then, I need to protect my daughter from experiencing the same hurt." She didn't reply, and I didn't expect her to. I had set my boundary clearly and with love, not anger. The ball was in her court now, and I was finally at peace with that reality. The journey toward healing continued in the year that followed my decision to maintain firm boundaries with my mother. Through regular therapy sessions, I began to unpack the layers of childhood wounds that had shaped my self-perception. Dr. Marshall guided me through exercises to recognize and counter the negative internal voice that had always whispered I wasn't enough, a voice that sounded suspiciously like my mother. James's unwavering support was my foundation during this challenging time. His family stepped up as well, providing Lily with loving grandparents who delighted in her without condition or comparison. His mother Carol never tried to replace my mother, but offered a model of what healthy maternal love could look like. She called regularly just to check in remembered details about my work projects and showed genuine interest in my thoughts and feelings. We established new traditions as our little family, creating memories untainted by tension or favoritism. Lily thrived in this environment of consistent love and attention, growing into a confident, secure toddler who knew without question that she was cherished exactly as she was. One unexpected development came 6 months into our estrangement from my mother. My father, who had been largely absent since I was 8, reached out via email. "I've been doing some serious reflection," he wrote. "I failed you as a father, Anna. There's no excuse for my absence, but I want you to know that it was never because of anything lacking in you. The failure was entirely mine." We arranged to meet for coffee when he visited Boston for business. The reunion was awkward but healing. He made no excuses for his absence, took full responsibility for his choices, and asked for nothing except the chance to know me as an adult if I was willing. Over several months of cautious communication, we built a relationship based on who we were now rather than the past. When he eventually met Lily, he approached her with gentle patience, never pushing for immediate connection, but earning her trust gradually. Watching him become the grandfather he had never been as a father was a surprising gift I hadn't expected. As my circle of support expanded, I also focused on building what I called my chosen family, close friends, who provided the unconditional acceptance I had always craved. Jasmine from college remained my closest friend, now living just 30 minutes away with her husband and son, who was close to Lily's age. We had weekly playdates that nourished both the children and our friendship. My colleague Taryn became another essential support person, her warmth and wisdom a constant reminder that family connections weren't the only meaningful relationships in life. Our Friday lunch tradition became sacred space for honest conversation and much-needed laughter. 7 months after our last communication, I received an unexpected letter from Richard, my stepfather. Unlike previous contacts where he had tried to mediate between my mother and me, this letter focused entirely on his own reflections. "I've been thinking a lot about your childhood," he wrote. "While I never intentionally favored Melissa, I now recognize that my actions often reinforce the dynamic your mother created. I saw the hurt in your eyes many times over the years and did nothing. That was a failure on my part, and I am truly sorry." His acknowledgement of what I had experienced without excuses or minimizing was profoundly validating. We began occasional phone calls, careful conversations that respected my boundaries with my mother, while allowing for the possibility of a healthier relationship with him. 9 months into our estrangement, my mother made her first tentative step toward acknowledgement. It came in the form of a brief text message. "I've been thinking about what you said. I know mistakes were made in how I parented you and Melissa. I never meant to hurt you." It wasn't the full acknowledgement or apology I had hoped for. The passive "mistakes were made" language avoided taking direct responsibility, and there was no recognition of the specific patterns of favoritism I had described. Still, it was the first time she had admitted to any wrongdoing at all. After discussing it with Dr. Marshall, I responded with cautious optimism. "Thank you for that acknowledgement. It means a lot to me. I hope we can continue this conversation when you're ready." 2 weeks later, she suggested meeting in a neutral location, a cafe halfway between our homes. After careful consideration, I agreed with the understanding that this would be a conversation between adults, not an immediate resumption of regular contact or access to Lily. The meeting was tense, but civil. My mother looked older, more fragile than I remembered. We exchanged awkward pleasantries before addressing the reason for our meeting. "I've been seeing a counselor," she admitted, surprising me. "Richard insisted after everything that happened. I didn't think I needed it, but it's been educational." I nodded, encouraging her to continue. The counselor suggested I might have favored Melissa because she reminded me of myself at that age, struggling, needing extra support. "You were always so capable, so much like your father in your independence. I think I resented that sometimes." Cooking down. It wasn't a complete understanding of the dynamic, but it was more insight than she had ever shown before. That still hurt me, I said quietly. Being punished for being capable watching Melissa get attention and support, I desperately wanted to. She nodded slowly. I'm beginning to see that. I still don't remember everything the way you do, but I'm trying to understand your perspective. It wasn't everything, but it was a start. We agreed to occasional phone calls, a slow rebuilding of communication, before considering in-person meetings with Lily. 3 months of cautious phone conversations followed some productive others, frustrating when my mother would slip back into defensive patterns. But there was progress, however halting. When I finally agreed to a supervised visit with Lily, we met at a public park near our home. James was present the entire time, a silent support and safety net. My mother arrived with a large bag of expensive toys for Lily, clearly hoping to win her over immediately. When Lily, unfamiliar with this stranger, clung to me shyly, my mother's face fell. She doesn't know me, she said with genuine sadness. Relationships take time to build, I replied gently. She needs to get comfortable with you gradually. It was a difficult lesson for my mother, who had always expected immediate connection without the work of building trust. Throughout the visit, I had to redirect several times when she tried to override my parenting decisions or make comments comparing Lily to Melissa's stepdaughter. Old habits died hard, but at least now she was somewhat receptive when I pointed them out. As we were preparing to leave, my mother asked, "When can I see her again?" "Let's take it slowly, Ma," I suggested. "Maybe another park visit in a few weeks." Her face showed disappointment, but she nodded. "I'm trying, Anna. I know I wasn't the mother you needed, but I'd like to be a better grandmother than I was a mother." It was the most honest acknowledgement she had offered, and it opened the door to a new, carefully managed relationship. Over the following months, we established a pattern of limited, supervised visits. My mother struggled with the boundaries I set, occasionally slipping into old patterns of criticism or comparison, but she made genuine efforts to improve when called out. Our relationship would never be what I had longed for as a child. The deep wounds of childhood favoritism had created patterns too ingrained for complete transformation. But we found a new dynamic as adults, respectful if not intimate, managed if not effortless. As Lily approached her 3rd birthday, I reflected on the journey of the past 2 years. The little girl who had once wondered why she wasn't enough, why her mother's love seemed conditional when it should have been her birthright, had become a woman who understood her own worth. A woman who could set boundaries without guilt, who could offer forgiveness without sacrificing self-protection. Most importantly, I had broken the generational pattern. Watching Lily grow secure in the knowledge that she was loved unconditionally, that her worth was inherent rather than earned, healed parts of my own childhood self that had never believed those truths. The cycle of favoritism, comparison, and conditional love that had shaped my childhood would end with me. My daughter would never experience the confusion and pain of feeling secondary in her mother's heart. She would never question whether she was enough just as she was. In the end, becoming a mother helped me understand what I had deserved all along: unconditional love, validation, and acceptance. While I couldn't change my past, I could ensure that Lily's future would be different. And in creating that secure foundation for her, I found healing for myself as well. The little girl who wondered why she wasn't enough finally understands she always was. And now my daughter will never have to wonder that same question. Have you ever had to set boundaries with family members who hurt you? Share your experience in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please give it a like and subscribe to hear more stories about healing from family trauma. Thank you for listening to my journey, and remember that you are enough just as you are, no matter what anyone else might have made you believe.